Hello and welcome to the Labor John podcast. Today we have two very special guests with us, Kayla and Matteo. Hi, how are you both?
Very good.
Good.
Totally fine.
Everything's fine in the world.
Yeah, doing great.
Well, my name is Sam, and I'm joined by my co-host as always.
I'm Gabe Christie.
And Gabe, we have these guests here for a very special reason. Why is that?
Well, we're going to be finding that out in a moment. So,
All right. Let's go.
Kayla and Matteo, if you two can introduce yourselves and explain what unions you belong to.
Yeah. I guess I'll jump in first. My name is Kayla Hoskinson. I am a member of DC 47, Local 2187. That is the municipal union in Philadelphia, and those are all of the city workers who are not supervisors. And I'm a steward. It's fun. Things. Yeah.
And that's AFSCME, right?
Yes, AFSCME.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Matteo. I am also part of AFSCME DC 47, Local 397. I work at the Penn Museum. That is part of the University of Pennsylvania. 397 is the Cultural Workers Union.
Awesome. Well, we have both of you here to somewhat tangentially talk about AFSCME. But if you can briefly explain what Green for Palestine is, and I guess give a very brief overview of how that kind of came about.
Green for Palestine, as it stands now, is a collective of AFSCME, rank and file, and staffers coming together to organize around Palestine. We've been at it for a few months now, and it's been great. I think there's been a lot of actions and movement within locals across the states, and it was an idea to connect with everyone and come together and hopefully maybe put pressure on the international to kind of like send up our calls. Because, Kayla and I and, so many other people in Philly have been doing a lot of great work. And there's been a lot of great work in Chicago and New York. I know there's a lot of good stuff going on in Portland, Wisconsin, everywhere. So we all want the same thing. And we've been working hard together to get there.
Thank you. And so were either of you involved in the pro-Palestine or anti-Zionist or BDS movements prior to getting involved with Green for Palestine, or really prior to the recent uptick in October, or since October of 23?
Yeah. So some of the work that Matteo and I have been involved in goes back a long while. Like my particular personal union related story starts in 2021, and I have a lot of colleagues that their involvement goes back further than that. But at the library, I'm a library employee. Hello, children's librarian. I have children's librarian voice. It's like a whole thing. But in 2021, there was another huge assault on Gaza, and there was also around the same time a recent children's book publication called "Baba, What Does My Name Mean?" by Rifka Bede, and I did some virtual programs like online videos about Palestine using Rifk's book and kind of talking about how parents or educators can talk to young people about Palestine. And I'm realizing that's not organizing work, that's work, right? But that's what we did. But it turned into organizing because the ZOA got a hold of that. There were calls successfully to censor my programs, and it led to a lot of organizing in the library as a whole. And so we had about 150 colleagues like sign on to a letter to support library work and programs about Palestine, to affirm that libraries are not neutral spaces. Like all of the work that we do is political by nature. And it was an incredible moment, right? And that's kind of like, in terms of some of the work that brings us here today, that's sort of where it started, of just a video about a book about Palestine.
And the fact that you were being censored means you're doing something right. So
sure, yes, absolutely. Yes.
No, that's, and actually, I think Labor John was, I think, just getting off the ground at that point. But I think I do remember seeing that that cropping up on various Philly Union social media.
Yeah,
it was a fun time. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So with that, what obstacles have you faced in specifically the organizing side of it, not just obviously getting your program censored, but in terms of organizing with Green for Palestine, or any of the organizational work that came before that, from either outside AFSCME or from within? Obviously, without burning too many bridges.
Oh no, yeah, we wouldn't want to do that. I think, Matteo, I can try to speak to that for a sec, and I know that you're going to have some good stuff for broad Green for Palestine and Penn. But I think one thing I'll say is that, librarians are not a monolith. There's a lot of us that really, we're kind of tuned into and dedicated to having collections and doing work and doing programs that represent as many people as possible, with a focus on folks who are more marginalized. And we realized pretty quickly that a lot of our work didn't do that for Palestinians. And also anti-Zionist Jews. Like, we were failing on many levels. And some tension that we faced and problems that we experienced were, back in 2021, it's a whole different minefield than where we are now. Like, I think if that had happened now, it wouldn't have been so hard. But we faced a library administration that was really antagonistic, that folded really quickly to Zionist pressure. They're like, having received death threats, I was also like, there were emails about the work that we do, equating that to anti-Semitism, excuse me. And it that kind of like political landscape was like really, really gross and tricky to get through. And the way that we faced that was through the union going through the grievance process, and kind of calling it out of, tying that all into an unsafe working environment, filing a grievance against our employer, and trying to handle things that way, which was then in itself a pretty difficult experience. Like, it's a very emotionally vulnerable thing. And we are in a really different spot today, like, yeah. But yeah, Matteo, do you have anything to add?
No, I guess if we wanted to get into talking about like our recent organizing work within DC 47, and I don't know if y'all want to hear about like the ceasefire resolution that we cooked up, and
please do.
Yeah. I guess, Kayla, you were pretty, you were the one who kind of spearheaded that, you and Greg, and I think a few other people. So if you wanted to.
Yeah, I can start with that. Yeah, so cut from 2021 to 2023. A bunch of rank and file workers across different locals in DC 47 realized that we needed to engage in ceasefire work. And it was around the time where the USPS had, their union had released a ceasefire resolution. So we were like tying it to some major things that we were seeing in the labor world. So we wrote a pretty long ceasefire resolution that was like very meaty. And maybe like, bigger than anything that, would have potentially gone through. But we had about 20 workers engage in writing, editing, commenting, and putting together a ceasefire resolution that we kind of all agreed with and knew that we wanted to see in the world. We submitted that to our union, but before we officially sent it to them, we wanted to make sure, because we knew it would be controversial. We knew that it's something
Sure.
that, like, this was back in like November,
Wow.
which feels like 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
We knew that if it was just like, oh, hey, here's a thing, can you do it? It would be easy to write off. And so we engaged in actually organizing across all of our shops in multiple departments, getting people to sign on to support the ceasefire resolution that we wrote. And so that was just under 100 signatures. It doesn't feel like a lot, but I think it's a pretty big deal that we had so much support. And we had it across my union, local, across Matteo's, and like 4 others. And people were sharing it and commenting on it. Through that process of trying to get rank and file support for the ceasefire resolution, we also engaged in asking folks if they were submitting, like, we gave them a chance to submit feedback, basically asking, is there something in this resolution that you really don't agree with? Is there something that makes you hesitant to support it? Is there, trying to really engage in a process where we could continue to make edits and create something that was solid, but also captured a swath of opinions.
Sure.
So that's what we did. We did that. We just talked to all of our colleagues for a long time.
That's all organizing effort is.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, 100 people ain't too bad.
Yeah. So we sent it to DC 47 leadership, and I don't know how deep you guys want to get into like the full.
Sure.
I'll just
please.
do it. Yeah, just stop me.
You're here for some drama, so.
Yeah. Yeah. So we prepared. Neither Matteo or I are on like the executive board, and we're not delegates. Those are where all the voting like meetings happen. So we were not actually there, but you better believe we were coordinating in the background, because that's what we do. So we were like prepping people for this meeting of like, hey, we presented, we know at this meeting the ceasefire resolution is going to come up, and people were kind of ready to talk about it, to support it, to try to get people and other folks to vote positively for it. I have notes.
You're better than us.
It's a lot, so it's helpful to have a little timeline for me.
And like you said, this feels like a century ago. So
it does. It really does. So during the meeting, there was like a surprise call via Robert's rules, which are the bane of my existence, Loki, to move it to a special committee. And no one really expected it. There wasn't time to intervene. It just happened. The ceasefire resolution would be discussed, but it would go to a special committee, and that would be decided by leadership. And so then there were 2 main co-authors kind of spearheading this. That's myself, and Matteo mentioned Greg. And so we kind of wanted us both to be on that committee. It was like it was a whole thing, and ultimately it was me. And then Matteo, you were on the committee. And there were a number of other folks who were selected to be on that special committee to discuss a ceasefire resolution. It was funny. It included, we didn't really know what to expect.
Sure.
There wasn't a lot of like sharing information. It wasn't very transparent. We were trying to figure out like, well, why is it a special committee? Who's going to be on it? We were told that they wanted like diverse representation. What does that mean? Don't know. Still don't know. It's fine. And so, there were a lot of like, I'm a kind of person that I want to kind of understand what I'm getting into, and that we just kind of went into it. And so I think Matteo, you and I were in the position to prep as much as we could, given that lack of information. So ultimately ended up being like 6 people, including Matteo and myself. We did like cute little prep lessons to like learn Robert's rules, because we wanted to like know how to handle ourselves in this meeting. And it wasn't even that we didn't need to do all that, but we did. Yeah. But we did a lot of
Robert's rules.
Yeah, we did a lot. Yeah, I do. Yeah. So we did a lot of prep, and we included more rank and file members in that prep. During that time, before we got into that committee, we were set like an alternate resolution that really did not meet the spirit of what we had wrote originally. So then we ended up doing a full rewrite of our resolution to kind of meet, not in the middle, I'd say like 3/4.
Okay.
As, something that doesn't immediately start with like, everyone who engaged in the process of writing the resolution knew that we did not want to start with October 7th.
Yeah.
Like that wasn't the end all be all. That's not the reality of Palestinians' like lived experience. This did not start October 7th. So
And everybody else was doing that. Newspapers were doing that. Organizations were doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. So we wanted to avoid that. So we just like rewrote to one, recognize some of the issues that were clearly like giving people like the heebie-jeebies, but make sure that the resolution that we ended up with still had teeth.
Yeah.
And we didn't want something that effectively said nothing. We didn't want something that just like passed and did nothing and got nowhere and wasn't publicized. So we wrote this alternative version. And if you guys want, I can send you each document because I have them.
Sure.
It's fine. Yeah. Yeah. So we retold that, and that ended up being the document that we worked from the committee itself. There was another committee member who Matteo and I don't know, but he saw the draft that we came up with, said we should go with like what Kayla sent, and we worked off of our like our compromise essentially. But it meant, I think, that the meeting went as well as it could have. It meant that we didn't have to fight through a lot of the stuff that would have, made people upset or ruffle their feathers. For instance, like we really wanted to have, let me just double check. There are a couple of things that we really wanted to have in it, but we realized we needed to drop.
Was it a long meeting, Matteo?
It was like an hour and a half.
Yeah, it wasn't too long. It was funny. I was actually I was driving to my parents' house in Illinois for the holidays, and then I like stopped at my grandparents' house in Ohio and like had this meeting in my grandma's office, and I kind of didn't want to get into politics with my grandparents because I didn't know where they stood on it, and they're like, "Oh, what are you doing in there?" I was like, "Don't worry about it." Like,
oh
it's
no,
I forgot.
I was just like, I really don't feel like talking about this right now. But it was only like an hour or so.
Okay.
One of the things that Kayla, you're probably trying to find is that we really wanted to call it for what it was and use the word genocide, and they didn't like that. So,
that was bad at the time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we had to compromise on, and none of us were thrilled about it, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Another thing is like we really wanted to include in it where our tax dollars go. I think that's really important for, especially for, I mean, for all workers, for everyone. We pay taxes. We know we can see where our tax dollars go. We can see where they don't go.
Yeah.
So that piece thankfully made it in. But you know, a whereas section that we wrote about like stocks and weapons, that didn't make it into the ultimate draft, but we tried to find a way to get something that was like meaningful, that had a lot of power, that had action points, and would pass. And we did. And we did.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in there we had something down the lines of that that you know DC 47 would support member-led education. What's the word I'm looking for? Educational opportunities, which we did. We organized a teach-in that had an amazing panel. I think the recording is somewhere on Facebook that we would be willing to share with y'all if you didn't tune in. But I'm really proud of that teach-in. It was a really good turnout, and we learned a lot. We learned a lot about. Sorry, someone is outside playing really loud music, and I'm easily distracted.
I can't hear it for
we
what
can
it's
hear it.
worth.
If you wanna-
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you can jam to it.
I'll just start singing.
Great.
Yeah, we wanted the teach-in to speak to how U.S. labor has to do with Palestine and Palestinian liberation. And when I was organizing among my own people at the Penn Museum, that was like a really common thing I was running into, was people asking me like, well, what does our union have to do with Palestine? And it's like, how am I supposed to like explain to someone that like unions don't just benefit you in your immediate workplace? You know what I mean? Like unions stand for so much more, and like, you know, an injury to one is an injury to all. Like we've really been hammering in that quote, that phrase, because it's true. Like, like I believe that a union should stand for so much more. And we did put that in our resolution. Like one of the first lines was we took it straight out of the AFSCME Constitution. I don't know, Kayla, if you have it in front of you or not, but
I do.
Amazing.
I do. So we knew that in terms of our district council kind of taking this up, we suspected, and we were right, that there might be issues with engaging with the international. But in the international constitution, it says that one of our, a framework is to work with our brothers and sisters in other lands toward the improvement of conditions of life and work in all countries towards the wow, I'm going to try to say a word and I'm going to have a hard time. Diminution of international tensions and reduction in the use of armed force to resolve disputes and towards genuine fraternity of all workers. That to me is pretty clear.
All right. Yeah.
So
yeah, and not
we
to
leaned
mention
heavily.
The repeated calls from Palestinian trade unions themselves, like, I like, where's the solidarity, Yeah. So that was like a frustrating part of the organizing. And not to mention, like, I did want to say, I wanted to speak to how difficult it is to organize on Penn's campus at all about anything. Penn is such a terrifying place. And I've been pretty heavily involved with the Coalition of Workers at Penn. It's basically all of the unions and forming unions on Penn's campus, working towards the greater good. I also, within organizing on Penn's campus, I got to know a lot of student activist groups. And I spoke with some students who were working on like doxing and therefore anti-doxing, because Canary Mission, I'm sure the folks are familiar with Canary Mission. They had a huge presence on Penn's campus, and folks are getting doxed left and right. These students told me to delete my LinkedIn because that was like Canary Mission's main source of information for people. So I deleted my LinkedIn immediately. And, you know, like they kind of helped me through like how to avoid getting doxxed, what to do if you get doxxed, which I think like added more fear inside of me while I was, you know, going around talking to my coworkers. And yeah, I don't know. It was really scary, and I feel like I moved with a lot of like more caution than I normally would want to move with, and I still feel like I'm harboring some of that caution even now when I'm talking about, you know, like organizing and continuing to organize and talking to more and more people. I still am like I'm scared, you know, and that's a bummer.
Yeah. And that's ultimately the purpose of it in their goal. It's not just. It's to keep everyone scared of it down the line.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, I honestly, I haven't heard of this group before, and I just Googled them, and yeah, that's crazy.
Canary Mission, you mean?
Canary Mission.
Also, do not look up your name on Canary Mission. Don't do it. Don't do it. I was told not to. I don't know why. Just don't do it.
Maybe it would be a compliment if I actually find myself on there. It means I'm making a difference.
That's what some people think of it as. Absolutely. Yeah.
The leadership wall.
Yeah. It's scary. It's scary business. And, you know, they also have like a Twitter account, and like reading the comments on Twitter, like, you know, vile comments. I mean, you should never read the comments on the internet, but I did and was horrified.
Yeah.
So
I think that's such an important point. Like, it, you know, when I was being harassed in 2021, that's, you know, a lot of what I went through. I didn't read it. There were articles written about me. I didn't read them. For a long time, I didn't Google my name because, you know, there's just stuff there. But then I had friends, like solid supporters, who would share stuff with me that they read, and we have a lot of fear in how that machine can intimidate us. But then I think back to articles about me posted by folks from the ZOA, and they literally called me like the female Mr. Rogers, which is not an insult. Like,
that's a great compliment.
Yeah, where did they come up with that one?
Yeah, so they use that fear very, very well, and obviously it affects Palestinian and Black and Brown students and organizers a lot more than me. But then I think back to that, I'm like, you can't even do any better than that? Okay, like, yeah,
that's crazy.
But it's
sorry,
real.
guys, I had to go through
it's
that.
Real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are going through that, because that's insane.
Yeah.
And it has always struck me how similar the tactics are with red baiting historically. It just pretty much baseless slander, and then usually terrible insults as well that really don't land well, but somehow seem to have some effect.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually, Matteo, you brought up the calls from various Palestinian labor organizations, and has, since Green for Falasteen went public, have you had any opportunity to reach out to or connect with any Palestinian labor groups?
Not directly, no, but we have connected with Labor for Palestine because Green for Falasteen is pretty new, and there's not many of us right now. Up until like a few days ago, I was like the sole admin for the Instagram, and I was like, what am I doing? But you know, we're still like a younger group, and we're still trying to like find our footing and really like figure out how to work well together and get things done. But no, we haven't been in direct contact with any labor unions in Palestine, but I'm sure Labor for Palestine probably corresponds with them. I don't know. I look forward to talking more with folks in Labor for Palestine. I actually think they may be at Labor Notes this year, which I am going. I'm very excited.
Hey.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's important to be in close communication with, with folks there. Yeah.
We
got to get the labor notes, Gabe.
We do at some point.
You do. Yeah, you do.
We interviewed Susan from Labor for Palestine back in November. But yeah, they're a fantastic group, and so there are stateside. There are a number of other rank and file caucuses that have popped up of late. So you guys, obviously, without revealing anything, have you had any contact with like Purple for Palestine or any of the other rank and file groups that have come up in recent months?
Yeah, Purple Up for Palestine was really a huge inspiration for us. We kind of modeled our first post and like kind of our letter to the international off of what Purple Up for Palestine has done. I also sent them a cheeky little message being like, hey, we're a big fan of you. Like, you're an inspiration to us. So yeah, we've been communicating with all kinds of caucuses popping up.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And both Sam and I are obviously from the outside looking in, but it has been very exciting just to see all of this starting to pop up. And there's, not to be too much of a labor historian, but every generation or so, every couple generations, there's usually some big like rank and file struggle that just spreads across the entire labor movement, and it's great to see that this is what has kind of caused that this time around.
Yep.
Because it's an incredibly important thing.
Totally.
But so I guess, what are your goals for the future for Green for Palestine, or the broader pro-Palestine movement within AFSCME, if not Green for Palestine specifically, or just within DC 47 if you don't want to get too grandiose?
Sure. I mean, off the top of my head, we still have to do some mapping and some research, but divestment from Israel is top priority. Pressure on Biden or whoever the hell will listen, so but I think more concrete actions and divestment for sure. Those are the big ones for me. I don't know, Kayla, if you had some other stuff.
Yeah, locally, I want to see our district council and others do more than just ceasefire resolutions. I think that's a major point. I don't know, but I worry that like elected leadership might see like, oh, we did the ceasefire resolution, we're good, we're done. The point, and so much of the work that we put into it, is that this work continues, that we have a lot of educating to do across all of our workplaces. And it's also yet another layer on layer, like opportunity for organizing. So when we organize for Palestine, we're meeting folks who are then becoming more engaged in organizing and labor in terms of, our contract that's about to expire in July, things like that, and vice versa. And I want to see more folks like deeply involved in sharing this information with each other. And I want our elected leadership to really see and recognize the power of that, and see it in the, long line of labor standing as like taking a stance against war, essentially.
Yeah.
We've done it before. We can do it now.
Yeah. And especially with AFSCME's specific history of taking a very strong moral stance.
Yes.
And that actually brings up one other thing that I realized I forgot to mention. If you can comment on the international's ceasefire statement that came out, and what changes you would like to make to it.
Well, lots of changes.
Oh, this is going to be good.
I mean, it was funny because we were kind of writing up like this letter to the international being like, hey guys, this is what we want from you. This is what we expect from you, actually. And as we went public with that, they released their ceasefire resolution on the same day. And, we got ahead of them by this much. And we took some time to pick it apart amongst ourselves, but not publicly, because in the wise words of one of the folks in the group is like, we can't waste our time and energy like picking this apart piece by piece. It won't do any good. And so instead we really like focused on the things that we took the most issue with. And I know one of those was that like nowhere in their ceasefire resolution did they put any of the blame on the Biden administration or the US at all. Like it was just like, shame on you, Netanyahu. And it's like, no, like, he has like, we are actively helping him in this. And they just completely failed to acknowledge that. And so, and again, like it started with October 7th, and it's like, it's historically, it's factually wrong, and it's irresponsible for you to put something like this out. So we took our time with it, and we wrote up, what we think is a more acceptable resolution, and we're gaining a lot of signatures. I think we're over 200 now, and we're going to send it on up to the international and be like, hey, like, try this instead. So, when I just remember when I read it, like I was fuming. Everyone in the group was just like, can you believe this shit? And I was like, actually, I can believe this. So, not surprised.
I think I blocked it out entirely. I was just like, this is not worth any. No,
it was rough. But, but yeah, I have a lot of hope in this collective work that we're doing. And, I think, the future that I see for Green for Palestine, it's like Kayla was saying, like this goes beyond Palestine even. Like this is like the start of like real rank and file, like hardcore organizing. And and I think like, because Kayla and I are like we have our group of rank and file members here in Philly that we organize a lot with, and we acknowledge that not all locals in cities have that kind of group. And so I think Green for Palestine has been kind of a great way to like inspire other members across the country, and working with their coworkers and their fellow members to kind of like like organize within the union. And I think this is a start to something much bigger and great. Yeah,
it's a lot easier for other members to join something than it is to start something from scratch. So
totally,
you all have done the hard work so far.
Exactly.
And so and actually, how much, again, without revealing too much, how much does it exist outside of DC 47?
Green for Palestine?
Is it, are there other locals in DCs that you're in contact with, or?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh
awesome.
Yeah.
Like we've got, so Matteo, you said there's folks in Chicago, there's folks in New York, Portland. There are more people joining every day. And I think what's so special about that is like early on in my my personal political evolution, joining the caucus that Matteo and I are both in, obviously we read Jane McAlevey, and we read a lot and learned a lot about organizing in the Chicago Teachers Union. I admire so much the organizing that happens in Chicago, including the librarians. And so once I was in this space with like Chicago librarians, it was like this little shiver of like, wow, oh wow, we're in the same room over here. But it feels insufficient to say that it's so cool to like be in a space with folks you admire. But I think it's also important to see that we are dealing with the same things. We're organizing in the same ways. We're all trying to focus on like local organizing, right? Like, we're in a caucus of AFSCME members and other city workers in the city, and our work is not done and it may not ever be done, right? And they're also doing this thing in other cities. And I think it's really important to have this space where we lean on each other and share and give advice and organize. And it feels like a long game ahead of us. But I think it's one that's really vital.
Oh, it's fantastic. And it's really great to know that it is such a broad coalition.
Can you imagine if we were like, we're in a coalition of folks across the country, but it was just DC person? No.
I mean, at least within the realm of Labor John, we don't really recognize anything outside of the city borders of Philadelphia. So.
Fair. That's fair. Nothing exists outside of Philadelphia, actually. Yeah. It's all a myth.
So how can people outside of AFSCME help with you guys organizing, help with the movement overall? How can everyone else outside support you?
I guess to keep it local to Philly first, we are involved in organizing an upcoming Labor for Palestine March that folks may have seen. That's with the Philly Palestine Coalition. I think it's really important to get workers out together to show numbers, organizing speakers, to really drive home the point to fellow union members and other workers and everyone really that like this is our issue to confront. It's our issue to inform each other about like we want to see an end of genocide. Like that's just very clear. And so I think it's really good that we have like this inroad of supporting that coalition work. That it's probably not going to be just one march. I hope it's not, at least. Outside of that, I think what we've seen in the past in Philadelphia is there have been a number. Did we even say what caucus we're in? Okay, hi, I'm Kayla. I'm a member of AFSCME DC 47 2187, and I'm a member of Unity Caucus, which is a group of rank and file workers, repped and non-repped in the city of Philadelphia, organizing for better working conditions for everybody. Okay.
Hi, this is Gabe. That's Matteo.
And so, but there have been a number of pretty public-facing campaigns that a lot of us have been involved in alongside community groups. That has been really, we started at the beginning of the pandemic. It was an accident. It just happened. But that was organizing for safe working conditions in the libraries and PPE and safe working conditions and like equipment and hazard pay for sanitation workers who had their lives on the line. It was so I'm a librarian, my whole world's libraries. So like, once again, organizing for increased library funding. And that is part of like, what is it called? Like adjust Philly, like all the budget work, like tax the rich, things like that that's not all us. but we're necessarily a part of it because it impacts our jobs. And if it impacts our jobs, it impacts your services. And so that's necessarily outside of this like very specific Palestine organizing work and how that's infused all of our lives. But that's where we are. Like if you go to a Parks and Rec center, if you go to a library, if you get your trash collected, it's all of us. Matteo, museum, like, it's all of us.
Yeah. One thing folks can do to support us is be nice to your city workers.
Yeah.
That goes without saying, though, hopefully. And then Kayla, since Unity is like, super active recently, we revived the Instagram account, No Service, No City.
No services, no city.
No services, no city. Apologies. So if folks want to check us out on there, obviously Green for Falasteen, also on Instagram. And I've been trying my best to post on the Instagram, but I'm just one guy. So,
yeah.
So, but that's Green, the number 4, and then Falasteen. But yeah, and then other than that, talk to your coworkers, or if you're in a union, talk to your union people and get involved, I hope
call your city council members if there's something that you don't like. That's obviously because they don't staff us well enough, things like that.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. And as someone who spent, I think, a total of 3.5 hours on hold yesterday trying to get Philly property tax refund.
Oh, no.
Yeah, we should be funding city workers.
Yeah. It's a whole thing. We know where that budget is. It's not with us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think you've already done the socials call outs, but if there are any that you missed, I guess we should also say follow AFSCME DC47 as well, just to keep full understanding of everything.
Oh, yes. Yeah. And there are also separate accounts for local 2187, local 2186, Philly. And what is the cultural?
Oh, handle? we just rebranded. I don't remember.
We'll send it to you.
It's Philly PWU.
Yeah.
I think we follow everything. So just follow LaborJohn and then look through who we follow.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll all be there.
Yeah.
What an underhanded way to get more followers, Gabe.
I just want to say thank you to both of you. This has been fantastic, and it's been a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. This has been a blast.